until you make orders, until you give a clear signal, you can give industry confidence that in the way that lots of other countries across Europe have done. I mean, the Poles have done it, the Nordics, the Baltics, the Germans are doing it right now. We're not doing it. And so we are falling behind.
One minister seen as a contender to take over from Sir Keir Starmer has told a Times podcast that the UK could be in a major military confrontation in as little as 3 years, and we're not ready for it. The Veterans Minister, Al Carnes, was speaking to General Sir Patrick Sanders, former Chief of the General Staff, and Tom Newton-Dunn for the Times General and the Journalist podcast.
The potential for a military confrontation in quite a rapid timescale is increasing. People talk about dates like 2029. I think the Dutch Defence Minister did that, 2030. First of all, do you recognise the urgency of that time frame when it comes to deterring Russia?
Yeah, so 3 to 5 years. I've always been clear on this, and I've been clear with other people. 3 to 5 years for a geographically constrained conflict in some way, shape or form.
So others say it's not 3 years. 2029 is, we'd be lucky. Some say it's 2027 now because of the rate of increase.
And every time we've tried to guess it, we get it wrong. The reality is we need to be ready.
Well, Al Carnes also talked about his experience in military training.
The Army is training, as the Marines are, for a sniper to shoot one round, one bullet, 800 metres, point of aim, point of impact. And I could train my son in 2 weeks to kill you at 45 kilometres in a fibre optic drone.
That was Al Carnes. General Sir Patrick Sanders joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning, Kate.
Were you surprised by that warning from a government minister?
No, I wasn't, because although we can't predict what the future is going to hold, you can see that the trend is that Europe is much more exposed than it was, and that the sort of inherent internal logic of Russia's war economy means that even if they get a settlement in Ukraine, Putin's ambitions will not stop there. I suppose what I was surprised or encouraged by was the fact that Al Carnes, who I know well and have served with, was prepared to be direct and honest.
And do you think we get enough of that honesty? Because we talk a lot on this programme. We speak to lots of people who say, the UK could be ready, we could be prepared, we're putting enough money in. Is that true, or do we need to get real and stop saying this stuff and start being a bit more truthful about the state of affairs?
I think certainly for those of people who think about this all the time, nothing that Al has said is a surprise, and you can see from some of the polling and the increased level of debate that the fact that we're not safe and that we're not ready is beginning to cut through. But it's not enough for this to be occasional discussions. We have to make sure that we're explaining to the British people that our priorities have to change, because if the first rule of government is to protect the country, then you need to see that through. And I don't want to make this political, because I think every party has been guilty of underinvesting in defence. And I don't really want to talk about numbers, whether it's 2.5% or 3%, because they mask what needs to be done, which is just to get on and make some orders with industry, and make sure that capability gets into the hands of our soldiers, sailors and aviators as quickly as possible, so that we can deter what might be coming down the track.
And yet the Defence Industrial Strategy, investment strategy, which was supposed to be published last summer, delayed until autumn, is still not been published.
It's mad. This is, it's if you're sitting from industry's perspective, you've got companies, whether they're big primes or whether they're small and startups and small and medium-sized enterprises, burning through their own capital, opening factories, doing their own innovation. And there's a limit to how long they can keep that up for. And they can see the urgency. They know what needs to be done. But there's been absolutely no movement at all on orders or a clear demand signal from government for what we need from industry.
Did you get the sense, talking to Al Carnes, that he was frustrated with the pace of the government? I mean, we can sort of hive off the political ambitions because I think that is part of this conversation, but he's obviously going further than we would usually expect to see from a government minister. Do you think he's a bit frustrated with the Prime Minister on this?
He was scrupulous in remaining a loyal member of the government, and making sure that he wasn't directly criticising but he's not a normal minister. He's someone who just 2 years ago was a colonel in the Royal Marines. He's, although he wouldn't acknowledge it himself, he's got a very distinguished special forces background, and he came into politics in order to fix things, and it's taking much longer, I think, than he's comfortable with. So yeah, you can feel the frustration coming through, and not just from him, but pretty much anybody who works in and around defence and security is frustrated by the inaction and the lack of a sense of urgency.
One of the things that really struck me is that quote we heard from Al Khan's there at the end about, we are training our people at the moment to use technology that basically is obsolete in the war that is going on at the moment in Ukraine, and that he could train his own son to work a drone in just 2 weeks. I mean, when are we going to stop talking about this stuff and see a real change? How long does it take for that change to come through? Because it's clearly not there at the moment.
Well, the changes happen as a result of your experience in war, and each war is different. So, generals like me are always accused of trying to fight the next war like the last one was fought, and it will be different. So, the Ukrainians themselves, and indeed the Russians, have had to adapt initially within a matter of months, and now on a pretty much a fortnightly cycle of constant adaptation and iteration of the sort of technologies that we're seeing playing out on the battlefield there. We over-obsess on drones. I think what Al was saying was not, you don't need a sniper or a soldier or a marine to be able to engage a target at 800 meters. You need to be able to do that, and you need to be able to engage with a drone at 40 kilometers, because both will be relevant in the next conflict. So, the sort of capabilities that are in the existing program, people talk about tanks being obsolete and ships being obsolete. That's not the case. Until a drone is capable of holding ground or taking a city or controlling resources, then you're always going to need humans on the battlefield, and humans are going to need to be protected, and they're going to need to be moved around. So it's additive. It's not replacing it.
I suppose what I'm trying to get at here is, when we talk about defence often, we hear people say, the UK is too far behind. We're sluggish. We're not able to see where this technology is going, and we're not adapting to it quickly enough. But we're also not funding the companies that could do that here in the UK. Is that fair? And if you think it is, where does this need to come from? Is it coming from the Prime Minister? Do we need to see more from Keir Starmer to push that forward?
I think it is fair. I mean, it's not wholly fair, because, my former colleagues in the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force will absolutely be looking closely at the lessons that are emerging from Ukraine, will be desperate to be able to get these sort of capabilities into the hands of their people, to train with them, and to be able to adapt at the same pace that the Russians and the Ukrainians are showing. But we're not getting, until you make orders, until you give a clear signal, you can give industry confidence that, in the way that lots of other countries across Europe have done. I mean, the Poles have done it, the Nordics, the Baltics, the Germans are doing it right now. We're not doing it. And so we are falling behind. Where does that leadership need to come from? Yes, it needs to come from the Prime Minister. He's been good on rhetoric. He talked very, very strongly at the Munich Security Conference about needing to get to 3% by 2029, returning, recognizing that hard power is the currency of the age. But this is a wider debate that has to be had, and it shouldn't be politicized. We need consensus from both parties that this isn't something that should be politicized, that we need to reprioritize either our public spending, or we need to work closely with private finance to try to raise the money that's needed. But whatever mechanism it is, we need to do it now and urgently.
There is a report today in the paper that the UK cannot send the 5,000 troops to Ukraine that we have promised, because we would have to remove them from other places. Essentially, that 5,000 means 15,000, and committing to that would mean taking them from elsewhere. That's a pretty devastating place for us to be, isn't it?
I'm not going to speculate on where they might come from, because I don't know what, because I'm not close to it anymore. I don't know what the plans are for this force, what the composition is, and therefore where you would force generate it from. The numbers, if it's 5,000 from the UK, then generally speaking, we would want, a pool from 15,000 to draw them from. But this is what this tells us is commitments are getting bigger and harder and more often. They're coming more often. They're not getting fewer, and yet the size of our armed forces either isn't increasing or in some cases it's reducing.
So
it's just a signal that the age needs us to invest in our own defense and resilience.
So finally, is AI the answer? I mean, we're going to be talking on the programme later on about how AI models tend to opt for nuclear weapons when it comes to these kind of real conflict scenarios. They are now being built into and embedded in lots of areas of military technology, AI systems. Are you comfortable with that? Is that a good idea?
AI is an answer. AI is operating on the battlefield at the moment. I mean, we talk about AI as if it's a single thing. Of course, it's not. It's a sort of, you have lots of AIs, lots of different forms of artificial intelligence, and some of them are incredibly helpful. They can support decision making. They can increase the efficiency of logistics. They can take people out of harm's way. But the thing we've always been clear about, and actually we're very good at in this country, is the importance of focusing on AI safety. And we have this amazing AI Safety Institute in the UK that's world leading. And so the idea that you would integrate AI into nuclear firing chains and that sort of decision making, or indeed for the time being on lethal force, that should always be a human decision. It's just a question of how that is done.
Well, we are going to be talking more about that question later. General Sir Patrick Sanders, thank you very much for joining us on the programme this morning.
Okay.
And you can listen to Al Khan speaking on that podcast if you search for The Times' General and The Journalist podcast.
Is there, it's a competitive field this, is there an area where there's a bigger difference between platitude and rhetoric and actual performance than in military conversations? The number of times we talk about we're at war with Russia, we're effectively at war with Russia, it's coming in 26, 27, 28, we need to get to much more spending, we need to have a society geared to the notion that we have to stop doing something so we can do more in defence spending. It never seems to actually happen. We don't not only do not get the defence investment plan, we don't ever seem to get movement. It's just everyone's very good at furrowing their brow. Al Khan's a good example of this. They all talk tough. They're all, come on, rugged as all hell. Oh yeah, war with Russia, war with Russia. We never see any movement whatsoever.